Hey, it's your favorite girl, Chris Styles, and we are back for another edition of K.A.S.S.I.E Live. But first, before we go too far, I believe we need to usher in the Spirit of the Lord, because without Him, we are nothing, but with Him, we can do all things. So we should probably ask Him to be here. Pray with me.
Yes.
Lord, thank you. Thank you for another opportunity and to minister to your people. In your name, we praise you and we love you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All righty, dighty then. All right, so how about we introduce my first guest? This young lady is no stranger to the couch or the K.A.S.S.I.E project. So if you could, please, I know I can't hear you, but put your hands together for Lorraine Berry. You have to say it like that. It's Lorraine Berry. She is the founder of the S.T.A.C.I.E Foundation, and she's had a lot of amazing things happening too. She was one of the driving forces behind the K.A.S.S.I.E project, behind launching the K.A.S.S.I.E project. Welcome back to the couch, Lorraine Berry.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good. Oh my gosh, you haven't been here in, what are we, almost 5 years?
Yeah, about.
And she has an organization called the S.T.A.C.I.E Foundation. What's the acronym for that?
Striving to achieve compassion, intervention, and education.
So tell me why you started the S.T.A.C.I.E Foundation.
Well, I started the foundation in honor of my daughter, Stacy, who, along with her sister, was assaulted in our home by a stalker in 1999. And after losing Stacy and Christy surviving, I needed to find an outlet to do something positive to get through the negative. And the only way that I could do that was to pour back into the community that reached out to us in such an amazing way. Mm-hmm. So that was the start of the S.T.A.C.I.E Foundation.
So the community was helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
They
so
really
you had to launch the S.T.A.C.I.E Foundation, and its acronym is what it is because there was no compassion in your journey. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Speaking of the compassion, who didn't show very much compassion?
The courts, the offender, his family.
You had an issue with the attending officers, the ones with, just really a lack of sensitivity.
Yes.
About the part where they didn't even want to let you on your own street or in your own home.
Yeah.
After everything happened.
We were interrogated for 2 hours, treated like we didn't really matter, like we weren't a part of all of that. I didn't ask for this.
Right.
And yet here I am dealt a life sentence. I had to learn how to figure it out. I had to figure out how to deal with this and how to get through moment by moment by moment while my 14-year-old daughter Christy's in a hospital fighting for her life, not expected to live. So the law enforcement was not very friendly at first.
Okay, I don't even know which way, because I know your story, mm-hmm. and I know your journey, and it's like, I don't want to give the book away, but this is a very thick book. So I'm pretty sure we're not going to touch on all of this during the show, but there were key points to your story that just stick with me, especially about how he, waited for you all to come home because the intention was to kill the whole family.
Right.
So I don't want to tell the story. I want you to tell the story, Lorraine. That's why I brought you. Tell me the story. So how did it work? Well, not how did it work, but how did it go?
Right. Stacy arrived home that day on January 29, 1999, after getting out of school early, and found him waiting at the house for her. This young man was 20 years old. He was a transient. He was always in trouble, and he was infatuated with Stacy and wanted to date her, and she'd rejected him. So he took that as, if I can't have you, nobody can. And so they fought in the driveway. She walked in the house to get away from him, to get ready for work, and didn't lock the door like I told her to do when you're home alone. Wow. He slipped in 5 minutes later, found her in the basement doing laundry, tried to attack her 3 different times, and he had the cordless phone in his back pocket so she couldn't call for help. And he finally pulled a knife and stabbed her because she kept fighting him. And she collapsed across the hall into her sister's bedroom floor, where she bled to death while he stomped on her throat to make sure she died.
Oh my gosh.
He then waited for more than 2 hours for my younger daughter, Christy, to come home, and she found her sister dead. He forced her to the basement where he sexually assaulted her, strangled her with her shoestrings, cut both of her wrists, stabbed her twice in the stomach, and tied her up and threw 3 bicycles on top of her nude-bound body and left the house by taxi.
By taxi?
By taxi.
Was he not bloody? Was he? This is just something I'm thinking. You kill someone and then you attack someone else, and you get in a taxi and the cab driver's not curious, or I don't know, maybe he changed clothes. I don't know.
Yeah, the article of clothing he had on didn't show the blood, but there was blood on him. It was splatter.
So after this, where were you when this happened? You were at work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you got the call, what happened when you got the call?
When I got the call, it was an officer asking me when could I come home? And I said, what do you mean, when can I come home? What's wrong? And he says, well, we just need you to come home. And he kept repeating the same thing over and over again, and I kept asking questions, and he just kept saying, we just need you to come home. You need to tell me why. He finally tells me in a very nonchalant way that we have one of your daughters, and we just need you to come home. You have one of my daughters. Which one do you have? I don't have a name. You're a police officer, and you don't have a name?
Right.
Something's wrong with this picture. So I finally got agitated and just left the office. And on the drive home, what I didn't know was it was all over the media that two girls in Yorkshire had been sexually assaulted and both were dead. But I wasn't listening to the news. I was going over the conversation in my mind, or lack of, with this police officer and trying to figure out why he was calling me and not giving me any information. And then I arrived home to a crime scene and was forced into a neighbor's house by police officers, interrogated for 2 hours.
Had you been in the house yet?
No, I never got to the house. The roadblock was at the end of the road, and there was nowhere to go. The street was jam-packed with police officers and fire trucks, ambulances, just cars everywhere. It looked like a scene out of a movie. And I couldn't go anywhere but at the roadblock.
So you found out, when did you find out, about your daughters? Because, well, you said you weren't listening to the newscast, but they said they had one of your daughters. When did you find out which was which and what was happening?
So about an hour after I arrived home, or at the neighbor's home, I was told by my fiance Bobby, who found the girls, that Stacy was gone, and I immediately went into mother mode. Gone where, with who? Why didn't you call and tell me she was leaving? This isn't right. She knows she knows the rules. Yada yada yada. And finally, he looks at me, and what I didn't realize at the time is he was in complete shock, and so he was going in and out of basically consciousness. And he finally looks at me and he says, "Stacy's been murdered." So I'm standing in a room full of 40 police officers, and it's my fiance who tells me what's happened. And then they just tell me, the officer comes up and says, "We're trying to get you to the hospital." And I'm thinking, Bobby's injured. Never thinking it could be Christy. And still, it didn't even sink in that Stacy was gone, that she had been murdered. It just wasn't, I couldn't wrap my mind around that.
I understand.
It doesn't happen to us,
Yeah,
Who would do this to us?
You only read about it.
Right.
And it never happens to you or anyone you know.
Right. So we think.
So you get to the hospital, you finally get to the hospital. There was a little resistance there too. They
Oh, my
weren't
goodness.
very user-friendly, I guess you can say. What was your experience like at the hospital?
Well, when we got to the hospital, I expected to be taken to the front door. We were taken to the back parking lot. We parked as far away from the building as they could possibly get. An officer and a chaplain.
What was that all about?
The media. They didn't want us
right.
interceding the media, or the media
Right.
interceding us, and so they took us to the back. We finally got to the back of the building and walked into a long hallway, which at that point was in such severe shock that the hallway was barely wide enough for me to walk down, but 1,000,000 miles long. And I kept thinking, there's got to be somebody that can help us. I finally see a nurse, and I went directly toward her, and I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, my daughter was brought in by..." And that was all I got out. She blew past me, never made eye contact, never said a word, never slowed down. It was as if I was invisible, and I began to feel that way. We finally got to the common area, and there was a desk with a lady behind the desk, and I went up and I said, after standing in line for what seemed like forever, I explained to her why I was there. She said, "Honey, you're in the wrong line. You need to be over there. This is a doctor's office waiting area." And
Wow, amazing.
"Are you kidding me?" So I go to the next reception desk, and it's a young girl. It's a Friday night. She doesn't want to be there on a Friday night, and she's got an attitude 10 miles long, and so do I, and we clashed. And she told me that there was nobody by the name of Christy Reed admitted. Okay, what do I do now? Well, there's nobody there to help me. The police officer and the chaplain's gone. I had no idea who to ask. So I just spelled her name, and I said, "Can you please look again?" And she said, "We ain't got nobody by that name." That was the last straw. I leaned over and I said, get me a manager now. So a lady comes over and she said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're in the middle of a shift change. We're trying to get you a social worker. Can you have a seat for half an hour till we get that worked out?"
What?
I'm in one of the 100 top trauma centers in the United States, and they can't find my daughter, and they can't help me.